Oregon football loses cornerback Jaylin Davies to the transfer portal, and there's a path for Oregon basketball to get into the NCAA tournament. With 2 games left in the regular season, conference tournament next week, what exactly is that path? How does everything have to play out for Dana Altman's squad to get into the big dance? We discuss all of that today on Locked On Ducks. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster, lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen every single weekday. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks every single weekday. If you want a question answered here on the show, which will happen in an upcoming segment because of the listener, DM me on Twitter at Smalls_55. You can hit me up there or at Locked On Ducks, or you can tweet with the hashtag AskLODPod. You get a question answered right here on the show that will be in an upcoming episode. But I, right off the top, have to start, as always, like and subscribe if you haven't already. YouTube, wherever you're listening to the show on podcasts, we're free and available on all platforms. All that sort of good stuff. 5-star reviews, we like those. We like nice comments as well. If you feel that way about the show, if you don't like me, that's okay. But first off, right off the top today, very important. I got to take a little bit of an L here, and shout out to the YouTube person who commented and corrected me. It is not Nico Lama Leava. It's Nico Iama Leava. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I was thrown off there by the uppercase I, and my brain took it as an L. And you know what? We all make mistakes. I do, you do, we all do, and I'm not immune from them. So that's okay. So thank you, person on YouTube who commented that. And if I ever make another mistake, or you think I have, feel free to contact me. I'm not some godlike figure up here. I'm just a person who loves the Ducks, talking about them for your enjoyment, and I want to be accurate. Always want to be accurate. So Nico Iamaleava is the quarterback. I hope I'm pronouncing it. Iamaleava. I don't know that, but starts with an I, not an L. Got that corrected. So Jaylin Davies is in the transfer portal. After I talked yesterday about how the Ducks really haven't been hit that hard by the portal, it could be a lot worse. You know, there have been a couple starters that have left, but nothing too drastic. Then this morning, as I record this on Wednesday morning, it is announced that Jaylin Davies is in the portal for the Ducks. Do I need to take an L again on the announcer's jinx? I'm going to go with no on that one, because yesterday on the show, I talked about how, Josh Pate brought up something that I've talked about on the show, which is Oregon hasn't actually lost a huge influx of talent to the transfer portal this offseason, which is pretty remarkable considering we've undergone a coaching change. That can lead to a mass exodus of players for some schools. It hasn't been the case for Oregon. You always expect players to leave, but it really hasn't been that bad. And the answer, I think, is no to the announcer's jinx there, which this is a very real thing. I believe in it. I've seen it. I've done it before. It happens to the best of us. And I don't think that this is a super high impact departure. In fact, I know that it's not in terms of what he showed us on the field from this past season, because Jaylin Davies only played in 2 games. Now, what's being lost here for the Ducks is the potential player he could have become under Dan Lanning and this defensive-oriented staff with our rock star defensive coordinator, former defensive coordinator as a head coach. Jaylin Davies is a guy that I think we as Duck fans coming into this season, which is still many months away, but don't worry, we'll get there. Football will return, I promise. He's a guy who we had our eye on for DBs, which is definitely a question mark going into 2022 on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's one of the biggest question marks on the roster, because you're losing Mikael Wright and DJ James from last year's team. Those are your 2 starting corners. You lose a first-team All-American at free safety in Verone McKinley. That's a lot of production. It's a lot of talent. It's a lot of production. It's a lot of playing time. It's just a lot is being replaced there. And even with Davies going away, I think overall the DB room is in a pretty good spot. But Davies was 5'11", 175 pounds. He was a 4-star prospect from Mater Dei High School, which produces a lot of really talented players. On 24/7, he was ranked as the 10th best cornerback recruit in the country, so he's a pretty heralded guy. And he was the second highest rated defensive back Oregon had in the class of 2021. That was the highest rated recruiting class in Oregon football history. And he was second only to Avante Dickerson, the other DBs, Damon David, Jeffrey Bassa, Darren Barkins, and Avante Dickerson, who was the highest rated. And, it's worthy of note that Davies, not a guy who you ever want to see the program, but I don't think this is really all that surprising of a move. But he is a guy who came in as a 4-star. I gave you the accolades a moment ago. Decent looking recruit. Showed some really nice moments in one of the 2 games he played in the Alamo Bowl when he had 3 tackles. I thought he was doing some nice things. Thought he could perhaps compete for a cornerback position. But he also came into college with a lower overall rating than Jaleel Tucker and Jaleel Florence, who Oregon added in this most recent recruiting cycle, which is not technically done. There's still a couple of stragglers out there that Oregon could go out and get, but we'll see how that all plays out. A little bit more on Jaylin Davies today after I tell you that March Madness only a few weeks away, everybody. That means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to be running your brackets this year. Are you going for the usual or are you going for the best? We're running here at Locked On with runyourpool.com. Along with standard brackets, Run Your Pool offers game types like Survivor or Pick X. They have options to edit scoring, and they offer more intel to make your picks, all stuff you won't find at ESPN or CBS. Clearly, we believe in Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. While you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness, great promo code, at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. All the rules and details will be available there. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing and beating you there. Jaylin Davies was a guy who could have become a good player. There's no doubt about it. You don't get these sorts of accolades coming out of high school by accident. It doesn't really happen. But is this move really all that surprising, even though there's a lot of question marks surrounding the Oregon secondary? I actually think the answer is no. Not because he's not good, right? He certainly could be. I'm sure he'll go find another school and turn into a starting caliber corner, which is what he can certainly become. But Oregon quietly has kind of loaded up the DBs, in an offseason where we don't know exactly who the starters are going to be. There are just a lot of bodies in that room who are really, really talented. I mean, by this time next year, all these guys might not be in the room because there aren't going to be enough snaps to go around. I think that is entirely possible. But you've got Triquez Bridges, who's coming back, Dante Manning, former 5-star recruit, Christian Gonzalez. Those are the guys who at the cornerback slots probably project as your starters and regular players, right? 2 of the 3 on the outside, maybe 1 on the inside, rotate around. We'll see how the new coaching staff wants to play that sort of thing. But then you've got Avante Dickerson, who was a pretty decently rated 4-star recruit, Darren Barkins, and then Jaleel Tucker and Jaleel Florence coming in for the class of 2022. Those are just the corners, right? Then you got Bennett Williams, who's kind of a safety nickelback. Jeffrey Bassa, hopefully he'll be back at strong safety. I imagine he will. That hasn't been confirmed yet. That was a previous staff thing, but I bet you they put Jeffrey Bassa at strong safety. Steve Stevens is coming back to the Ducks on the back end of the defense as well in the secondary. So it's going to be a pretty brand new group. I mean, you're going to have at each of the 4 secondary positions, right? Your 2 outside corners and then your 2 safeties, 4 different guys than you had a season ago. But somehow this is just a really talented and deep room. So a guy like Jaylin Davies, who knows that he's capable of being a good player in college football, and we really did see that in the Alamo Bowl, right? He only played in 2 games. It was Stony Brook early in the year once Oregon got up big. Took longer than it needed to, but once Oregon got up big, and then the other game was in the Alamo Bowl. And so he made a few tackles in that game. I liked his open field tackling ability, and I thought he had some nice coverage moments as well. So he didn't see a lot of action, and he looks at this cornerback room, and I think it's a good sign that a guy like this is wanting to transfer away because he's not feeling, confident enough that he's going to be able to see the field regularly. That means he looks at the DB room and all the guys I've just mentioned, Bridges and Manning and Gonzalez and everybody else, And he says this is just going to be too tough of a competition. And that's a good thing. You want to have a bunch of talented guys in the room who can push one another, get the best out of each other, and ultimately produce the highest level players in the secondary that you can. So best of luck to Jaylin Davies. No hard feelings here. And again, this is another transfer for the Ducks, but it's a relatively low impact transfer because he only played a couple games this past season. So I think Oregon is going to be fine. And I think that I'm just excited to see what this defensive staff can do with a bunch of guys. You know, Bossa in particular, I've talked about that. I wonder if they can get Dante Manning to pop. I mean, when you look at the DB room now, Dante Manning, 5-star, Gonzalez, a 4-star, Dickerson, a 4-star, Bridges, I believe, was a 4-star as well, and then the two Jaleels are 4-star recruits as well. So there's plenty of talent at that position. But anytime you see a 5-star defensive player, typically that should be a guy who's automatically starting right away. And Manning, struggled as a true freshman. He did. And I think that if they can maximize his potential, he can turn into a lockdown corner. He's got all the physical tools to do that. We'll just have to see if he can fit schematically with what Oregon is going to do at the defensive end under Dan Lanning. Let's get to basketball because it's officially March, the most wonderful time of year. It is March Madness right up to the Masters. There's no better 1-2 combo of sporting events in the world than March Madness and the Masters, in my humble opinion, which is, what I get paid to come on here and do. And that's a good time. So it's the most wonderful time of year, and those two things are part of it. Also, days are getting a little bit longer. Daylight savings is coming up. All you golfers out there, you know how wonderful of a time it is about to become. Suddenly, you can play 18 holes teeing off at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. As we know, as it stands right now, Oregon basketball isn't where we would like them to be in terms of their standings. Talking about the men here, the women are, most likely going to get into the tournament. Shouldn't be a problem. The men, not where we would like them to be, not where they should be, based on the talent that Dana Altman acquired in the transfer portal this last offseason, how much they had coming back. They should be in a better spot. There's no doubt. So there is a path. There is a path. So it's that old Jim Carrey gif. So you're saying there's a chance. There's a chance. And it's not that unreasonable that Oregon could still play themselves into the NCAA tournament as they sit right now. Their first 4 out. And this is before the Washington game on Thursday that I'm recording this. So here's how it plays out for the Ducks coming down the stretch. You have to beat Washington and Washington State. That's the first thing. Right now, the Ducks are 18-11. They're 11-7 in conference play. You have to win those two, end the regular season with 20 wins. That's the first thing. And looking at each of those games, ESPN Basketball Power Index likes Oregon 63.5% to win at Washington. The Huskies have played some better basketball over the last couple months than they did early in the year. I mean, the first meeting between these two schools in Eugene, Oregon ran them off the court. It was literally never a close game. Oregon scored the first 10 or 12 points of the game, something like that. They had a 20-point lead before they even hit the half. It was never close. This is a different Washington team. They're playing a better brand of basketball, not a great brand, right? Oregon favored at almost 64% according to BPI on the road. That's telling, right? It's a game that Oregon should be able to win, but it's not going to be as easy, both because it's on the road and because Washington's playing better. It's not going to be as easy as it was before at Matthew Knight Arena. Here's what should give all of us Oregon basketball fans some pause. BPI's got Oregon underdogs Thursday in Pullman for the regular season finale against Washington State, led by former USF head coach Kyle Smith. And USF, by the way, the WCC, they might get into the big dance if they can close the regular season strong enough, which, good for them. 33.5% is the number that BPI gives Oregon in terms of a percentage chance to win that game on the road. And there's a couple reasons why I think that number is so low. I'll tell you what they are after I tell you. Football season might be over, but basketball, as we know, talking about right now, full steam for pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. Remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just basketball. Betonline.net, your source for hockey, boxing, UFC, and so much more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online, where the game starts. So what is this path for Oregon basketball? It's about that Washington State game, according to ESPN, right? You have to win both. If Oregon loses either of these games to Washington or Washington State, teams that, regardless of what BPI says, they should beat, they're going to have to just win the Pac-12 tournament to get in. That's the situation they'll put themselves in, and that's not a spot you want to be in. They were there a couple years ago. They ended up getting the Sweet 16, losing to eventual national champions in Virginia. It's not a spot you want to be. They pulled a rabbit out of the hat that year. Not going to happen every time. It's too tough to do, especially in a conference that's got USC, UCLA, and Arizona staring down at you as the top three teams in this conference. All locks to the NCAA tournament and top 4 or 5 seeds. So that 33.5% number is unfortunately telling for Oregon fans of a couple things. Number one, that Washington State, who also started kind of slow this year, has come on better. And they played Oregon very close, had a 3 in the air, got off on time to send the game to overtime at Matthew Knight Arena a couple weeks ago. Now, Oregon was the better team that day, but it showed that Washington State is capable of playing with the Ducks, and going home, they're only going to have an advantage. Will it be a rowdy environment? No, but just being on the road is tougher than being at home. And that's a place where Oregon, this is point number 2, Oregon has struggled on the road this year. They have not played their best basketball there. I mean, the Utah-Colorado sweep, yeah, that was nice and all. Colorado looks like a pretty decent win now on the road. Still unfortunate that we blew a 15-point lead early to them at home. But that Utah game on the road, kind of telling. That's not a very good Utah team. And Oregon, again, right down to the wire, Utah had a 3 in the air as time expired to tie the game. So there's just a lot of question marks here about whether or not this team can show up on the road. And they've got to play with the same sort of urgency they've showed the last couple of games. Honestly, I know they lost against USC, and that was wildly disappointing. But USC is a good team. If they play that way, that style, that sort of intensity, that sort of focus, even if they're not shooting the ball well, they find a way to hang around in games, they will beat both of these Washington schools. But they have to show that intensity. They have to play with that urgency of a team that can't afford to lose, because they cannot. They cannot afford to lose either of these games. It'll just be an absolute killer for their resume because of the bad losses that they've compiled this year somehow. And I was reading the latest bracketology for bubble teams, and they were talking about Oregon. And it was saying how, I don't remember exactly who wrote it. It wasn't Lenardi, but they were basically saying that if there were ever a team that could come within 1 point of a sweep of the LA schools in a season like this and miss the tournament, it's Oregon. That's 100% right. I mean, you shouldn't have taken 3 or 4 against a couple of top 15, top 20 teams and find yourself battling just to get into the tournament. But it's a situation that Oregon unfortunately finds themselves in. So that Washington State game will be tough. I wonder what will happen in Washington because of how the game went before, right? Because Oregon just ran them right off the court, and Oregon is the better team in this game, and they should win. What sort of urgency, what sort of intensity are they going to come out with from the jump? That's what I'll be watching for first and foremost tomorrow night up in Seattle. And speaking of games in Seattle, by the way, who remembers a couple of years ago, Peyton Pritchard hit that big step back off balance game winner against the Huskies in a packed out Alaska Airlines Arena, and Bill Raftery gave him an onions call. Woo, onions! No, I love Bill Raftery. Bill Raftery, gold standard of analysts in college basketball. He and Dickie V, man, that's just they just represent college basketball so very, very well. But that's what has to happen this week. Got to beat both the Washington schools. Then what? Oregon, according to Lenardi, has to get to the Pac-12 semifinals. How does that happen? You beat both Washington schools. What that does is it secures a top 4 seed. Now, Oregon is currently the 4th seeded team in the Pac-12, a half game ahead of Colorado. So they control their own destiny for getting a first round bye. The top 4 get byes into the quarterfinals. And then if that happens, which we'll cross our fingers, not going to say should, just because of how this Oregon team has played this year, but definitely could, highly possible. but not probable. You just never know. If they can get that number 4 seed, they then will have to win a game against either Oregon State, who clinched the 12 seed. They're the first team to clinch a seed in the Pac-12, or the 5 seed, which is likely to be Colorado. There are a couple teams underneath that are chasing the Buffs, but I think Colorado needs to win just one game to be the 5 seed. They'll probably take care of Oregon State because Colorado's a decent team that beat Arizona recently. They've been playing some good basketball. So if Oregon wins both Washington games and beats Colorado, right? Got to win 3 games in a row. According to Lunardi, they would be in. Now, that's not a guarantee because he said that about 10 days ago or so, or a week ago, and stuff can change, right? Bubble teams, the quality of their resumes can change, and wins and losses can change. It's an ever-evolving, day-by-day ordeal. It's why I've been monitoring it so closely here on the show. So if they're able to beat Colorado, that would probably be enough, right? You get to 20 wins, and Colorado, assuming it is the Buffs, would get you to 21, and that would be probably a quad 2 win. I imagine Colorado is that sort, and you'd be at 21 wins. Should be enough. If you get to the Pac-12 tournament championship game, puts Oregon in a really good spot. That would be, again, this is assuming they beat both Washington schools, which is just so far from a given for a variety of reasons. But honestly, if they want to just win the conference tournament and get the automatic bid, that'd be pretty hype. that would be a really nice thing for us as Duck fans, and it'd also give them a bunch of momentum going into the tournament, which is absolutely huge. But that's just not something that we can bank on. So beat both Washington schools. You're going to go up against either Colorado or Oregon State. Most likely will be Colorado, but we'll see how things play out. If you can win that quarterfinal game, get to the semis, according to Lunardi, that will be enough. So a lot of gray area there, matching the color of my shirt today for the Ducks. And it's the most wonderful time of year. I love March Madness. I love it even more when the Ducks are involved. Certainly hope that they will be. Final word for today. Let's end on a high note because we had a player leaving and a murky next 10 days for Oregon basketball. So let's end on a high note. After starting 0-3, Oregon baseball, they've won 5 straight games. Oregon softball, they're 11-3. Go Spring Sports. We just like wins no matter where they're coming from. I appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.